Zig coming in at the top of the interview. Today on the show we have Josh Caterer, most known for his work with the Smoking Popes, also with his work with Duvall, and his solo career, which, there goes Noodle, which we're here to talk about. He has a new album coming out called The Hideout Sessions. It was recorded at the Hideout in Chicago, which is an intimate venue, and as we know, all venues are struggling at this moment. You've heard me rant about the Grog Shop in the Beachland. This is a Bandcamp release, connecting everything. It's connecting community, it's connecting awareness of these venues, and it's got a unique personnel. And they do a cool version of Smoking Popes tunes, where they kind of did a spin on some of them, and they also do some old standard real book covers, which is very fitting for the crooning aspect of his style of singing. This interview was really cool. I think I caught him at a moment where he was rushing. We had to push it back a little bit. But I really much enjoyed this conversation with Josh, and I appreciate the insights he shared with some of his insane, rad experiences with like groups such as the Foo Fighters and Morrissey, and we'll get into that in the interview. Before we move along, this podcast is mixed by Studio 44. Studio 44, if you have any audio, video, or streaming needs, make sure you hit up Jay from Studio 44. Studio 44 can be located on Facebook at Studio 44 CLE or Studio44CLE at gmail.com, and Jay will get your stuff to sound as good as this. Also, if you can subscribe, rate, review the podcast on all the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to these awesome, inspiring people and sharing those insights with you. Also, we are now on the medias. We got the Instagram, the Twitter, the YouTubes, the Facebook. And if you can give us a like there, that also helps me reach more people to share those insights with you. So I appreciate you guys for listening. And here's my conversation with Josh.
Thanks for being willing to flex on the start time of this
for sure.
Interview. I was at a band rehearsal at church.
Okay.
The start time of the rehearsal got pushed back an hour, and then I was like, oh no. So that's why I got in touch with Howard and asked him if we could push this back a half hour and stuff.
Oh, it's all good. With church bands, it's one with COVID. You know what I mean? To get a group together to rehearse is already tricky, and
right.
With the vastity of like a church group, everyone's got different schedule. You know what I mean? It's hard to get everyone in one room in one place. So I totally get it.
It is. Plus, we have this added sort of obstacle in that, like we recently redid the sanctuary, and it has like a new sound system.
Oh boy.
Because we thought, for when the church shut down for several months, it seemed like a good time to redo that, since we weren't going to be using the sanctuary for a long time.
Right.
And then we just recently started to do in-person services again.
Gotcha. Did you guys do the streaming stuff?
We did streaming for like several months, which was quite an undertaking, because we previously hadn't had any online services, so we had to like instantly switch to completely online.
Right.
But now we have this new sound system, and so the people are still kind of working the bugs out of the new system, and the vocalists are trying to figure out how to get their mix right and their Avions that they're not even used to using.
Is that like in
so there was a lot of like reasons why this thing was bound to run long. So thanks for the extra time.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's an interest. I think that's a good place to start, because like adapting with everything that's been going on. Like I know a lot of churches offer like streaming services, and but to move into like where we're at now, where everything's so dependent on it, and if you didn't have that like from the ground up, or at least some like inkling of we got some cameras and people can tune in, but most people just come and hang out. Like to start that from the ground up when COVID hit had to be a big undertaking, because even just like to get like a camera switcher was like hard to do.
Yeah. Well, we had the advantage of having a guy on staff who was a pretty good videographer, and he knows how to do editing stuff. And so what we decided to do was instead of doing a live stream with a switcher, that we would record services during the week on multiple cameras, and then this guy would edit it together
Oh, okay.
into a cohesive unit, and that, so that we have a complete file that we're just pressing play on Sunday for people to see it, which worked out really well, except for that this guy's whole life became like recording and editing these services,
Yeah.
because he had like just hours and hours of editing work to do to put all this stuff together. And our goal, we're still doing it that way, where he records stuff during the week, edits it together, and shows it. We're moving toward, the plan is to move toward a live stream where we can just take, now that we're having in-person services, where we can just take that and do a live stream of it. But you need a switcher, and you need the program where you can run lyrics at the bottom of the screen while showing the band and all that kind of stuff. And
it's a lot.
we're not quite there yet. Yeah, it's a lot.
I've fallen into that because I'm a full-time musician in Cleveland, and like do all the different type of circuits. Like I do the nursing home gigs and the bar gigs, and during the day I'm a music teacher at a charter school. And like when this all hit, like it was like, well, how does that work? Like, how do we stream? Everyone's now a sound person. Your audience is now employed to tell you if they can hear you. Like,
yes,
it was such a, and when with a big ensemble, it's such a feat to do. I ended up hooking up with a buddy who runs a studio who mixes all the podcasts. And me and him ended up developing a good team, and like have done a lot of like webinars and streaming for like the Beachland Ballroom and other venues around Cleveland to kind of keep them afloat. But it's a different mindset, and it's really kind of hard to like differentiate between the two. And I imagine with like a service, when it's like you're there with everyone's coming together as one, there has to be a really weird kind of alienation of a experience, more so than maybe just a regular concert.
The whole transition to doing things online has been a huge adjustment for everyone, and I think probably the biggest, at least from, I would say this is true of of the church bands, but it's also true of the album project that I just did for the Hideout Sessions, where like you have to adjust to playing in a room without an audience,
right?
And the whole shift in your energy, because you don't have a crowd to sort of feed off of as far as the exchange of energy. It's almost like you almost wouldn't consciously realize how dependent you are on that in any kind of performance. Like try doing the same thing with no one in the room, or with like just a couple of camera people and somebody behind the soundboard, but an otherwise empty room, and still perform in a way that is actually going to come across on video. It's a completely different animal. And it's a hard adjustment for a lot of people to make. I'm a little more used to it because I've been in situations where, I've been in a band that's playing like on a TV show where there's not a studio audience, so you have to kind of, once you see that difference between what it feels like to be doing something and then what that action looks like when it's filmed and you're watching it again, the difference there can be startling at first, and then you realize that you can do things that might feel awkward or feel like they're too big or too expressive for the moment, but they're gonna work when you watch them later, or whoever is viewing it is not going to think of it as being too big.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't seem too big or too expressive if it was a room full of people, it would just be happening naturally. But the fact that no one's there and you're still doing it that way, you're like, is this weird?
Well, that
And then
makes
it becomes this meta thing about like, what am I even doing? Who am I?
it's weird. It's weird, like with like a small. So when the audience is the camera crew, how more like you internalize certain things, or like how with less people. Maybe I'm just speaking. I find myself to become a little bit more shy and
Yeah.
not comfortable, because with the room of people, you just go into it with that expectation of, well, whoa, who's ready? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
yeah, there's that thing, and like when that's
Yeah.
not there, and you have to like make it be there. That's a really. I think you put that in a really you put that in a really good way. That makes a lot of sense. You have to overcompensate to bring that feeling, and in that moment, it's gonna be weird, but post, you're gonna be like, got it. Like, they're
Yep.
comfortable. Josh knows what he's doing.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Did this
Totally.
kind of so let's take a couple steps back. What can you tell me about Speed Stick?
Oh, wow. Speed stick.
Yeah.
I'm First of all, I'm trying to remember the last time someone that was interviewing me brought that up. It does
Nice.
not often come up in an interview. Um, what I can tell you about Speed Stick is that it was a band that my brothers and I put together when I was a senior in high school, and it was kind of we wanted to start playing at basement shows. There
Right.
was a band at our high school that would just play like people's basements in the area out in the suburbs there where we were, and we wanted to get in on that circuit. So we put this band together, and it was sort of, in our minds, it was like a parody version of a hardcore punk band, where it was almost like it was inspired by Spinal Tap.
Okay.
So that the songs were essentially jokes. We would come up with a funny song title, and then we would write a song to go with it based on the sort of punchline of the song. And we did that for a year or two, and then decided that we actually loved being in a band and wanted to keep going, but it was time to get serious. So we changed our name, but we had gone in to a local studio as Speed Stick and recorded like a bunch of songs. I think we recorded close to 20 songs.
Was that Solid Studios?
No. This
Solid Sounds?
was before we got to Solid Sound.
Okay.
It was a home studio that a guy had
Gotcha.
in Crystal Lake called Curved Air Studios. And we went in and recorded like 18 songs and as Speed Stick. But then when we decided to let's get serious and pick a better name and be the Smoking Popes, we picked, I can't remember how many songs. Was it like 5 songs on our first on that Inoculator 7-inch? Those songs were recorded as Speed Stick, but we went through and we found like the least ridiculous 5 songs that we had, and said, do we have anything here in this batch of songs that could remotely be taken seriously? Because a lot of them were just like stupid jokes.
Right.
But these were songs that were like, no, these are kind of real songs. So let's put this out as Smoking Popes and have this be our inaugural effort.
It's a almost more comforting, I'd imagine, like kind of approaching something as a joke, like we're minor threat, and here's a you know what I mean, like kind of a spin on it where it can just be fun, and like it's not like this personal thing you're putting out. You know what I mean, that everyone has to like. So I guess the return of that is a little more comforting. It's to come out and be doing something silly with your brothers that there's no like you can't be like put down for it. You know what I mean? There's the
Right.
comedic aspect is like this cushion, just go out there and have fun. Now, did you start playing and singing before all this, or was this like your first like, oh cool, we can partake in the our local scene and like hit some basement venues, which are usually the best shows ever? How come was it that the inspiration to start playing, or was music involved
No,
before?
music was present in my life and in our lives before that. I had been in a band in my last couple years of junior high school.
Okay.
I was in a band called Slave Driver.
Okay.
that that I think we played like 3 shows, and we never released anything. And it was mostly covers. We did a Motorhead cover uh, of the song "Killed by Death." I remember we did a cover of "Sweet Leaf" by Sabbath. We did "Flight of the Icarus" by Iron Maiden, because
Nice.
a couple of the guys that I was
Yeah.
in the band with were real like metalers.
Right.
So they loved that kind of stuff, and that's what we did. But even before that, I was writing songs and doing home demos of songs since I was about 11 years old.
Wow.
Um, and by home demos, what I mean is that we had 2 boom boxes. And if you remember back when boom boxes were really in their heyday, they would have a condenser mic on them. So you
Yeah.
could just record. You could press record, and it would pick up whatever was happening in the room. So what I would do is I would record myself playing a drum track on one boombox, and then I would put the 2 boomboxes like about 3 feet apart, and I would play the drum track on the one boombox and record it on the other boombox, and I would play guitar along with it. And then I would take that and play it and record it on the other boombox, but play bass along with it. And then finally, I would do that and sing along with it. But so it was like this sort of crude version of multi-tracking.
Right.
But by the time I was doing the vocals, like the drum track had been recorded back and forth between 2 condenser mic boom boxes,
It had to be so buried.
three times, so that the
Right.
drums sounded like really ridiculously thin, like you were hitting a piece of paper with a pencil or something. And I don't know, none of those recordings I don't think exist anymore, because they were all on cassettes that got
Right.
lost over the years.
But what a good practice to be able to hear all these different levels of things. And then, when it gets time to put people together and try to figure out some Maiden tunes, be like, okay. Like, what are like, especially at like 11. I think back when I was 11, I wasn't doing anything that cool. Was music in the family? Like, did your parents introduce you to playing guitar, or like, was this just something you kind of
Yeah,
picked up? Yeah?
no, our dad played guitar, and he played guitar and sang a little bit. Like, he was never in a band or anything, but he
Right.
just there were times I remember being a little kid, like 6, 7, 8 years old, and my dad would get his guitar out and sit in the living room and play along with these songbooks that he would get of what were popular songs at the time. So I remember like him playing Night Moves by Bob Seger and looking at the sheet music for it and playing along with it. And all 3 of us kids would kind of stand around and sing along with them, and that being sort of a fun family activity.
Yeah.
And both of our parents loved music a lot. Our dad had a lot of records, like probably a couple hundred LPs, all on these shelves in the living room. Like they were low shelves, so as kids, we could look through these albums and play any of it. He gave us
Right.
access to his stereo system. So like he had every Beatles record on vinyl. He had a bunch of Stones and Zeppelin and The Who and all these like what were then still like active bands.
Right. Heavy bands.
Heavy rock bands, but he also had like blues music. I remember discovering a bunch of things in his record collection, like Muddy Waters, and he had Frank Sinatra in there. I remember listening to his copy of Sinatra at the Sands, and a bunch of that kind of stuff. And then our mom liked country music, so she had every Kenny Rogers album and every Willie Nelson album and Merle Haggard and Dolly Parton and that sort of thing. And so, as kids, we had access to all that kind of stuff, and not only hearing different styles of music, but also interacting with recorded music in an important way. Like when you're a little kid and you're listening to a vinyl album, like when you're a small person, and so it's like a really big object,
Right.
An album seems huge to you, and you put it on, and then you're looking at this album cover that just seems like this enormous sort of poster that you're holding, especially if it opens out into a gatefold.
Yeah.
And there's any kind of pictures on the inside, and so you listen to the album and you're just lost in this world of looking at these pictures. Back before the internet, this was how this is how you this was the image of these artists that you had was the pictures that they were putting on these albums. Like when I first started buying like AC/DC records, I'd never seen an AC/DC video. I just would listen to their music and I would look at the pictures, like on their album High Voltage.
Right.
There were these little, you
That's
remember
a good
that
record.
album?
Yeah, my first was that your first band that you bought the record to? Was AC/DC? Because that was mine.
No, it was one of the first, but the very first was Thin Lizzy.
Nice. Equally as cool. But anyway, so
Yeah.
when you're looking, it is all immersing these big records, and that's it. That's who's making the sound. But
Right, and so on the back of that album High Voltage, if you remember, there's pictures of the individual band members, but they're like in the form of almost like Polaroid pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then going along with each one of those pictures, there's like a fake letter. Like there was like next to the picture of Angus, there was like a letter from his like school principal that was supposed to be like a letter that was like sent home to his parents.
I do remember that.
About how he had misbehaved or bitten somebody in class or something like that. And like, I think I was too young to really understand that was all tongue in cheek.
Right, that was a bit.
And so I'm like, I thought that maybe those stories were real, and these little
awesome.
Polaroids of the band were like, you could really get lost in the world that was created by these albums,
right,
in that way.
Which is beautiful, because that's what they want you to see, right? And like, even if it's misguiding, like, oh well, I guess maybe I should bite teachers. No, but the idea that you can become that immersed in it because all you have is a select few images, and I think that plays into like concept records to like another level, and that's it. And like, it's such a kind of to go on the flip flop of it, like a lot of like albums now, the image is condensed, right? And so is the sound. Everything is a much smaller experience, which is all right, you know what I mean? Because we're carrying around the entire discography of AC/DC, so you can immerse in that way. But at the same time, being able to take just one sliver of their career and be that obsessed with it is something special.
Yes.
And I think that's why when someone shows you a record or give it like when you have that first experience where you can really look at it, it impacts more. And what a
I
cool
totally agree.
environment to like the sidetrack grow up in, because like music, like I don't know if you're hip to Victor Wooten, but he's got that whole bit about music being a language, and like it, like when you speak or when you're a baby learning to speak and you start to babble, no one expects you to be like a professional uh, English speaker. You're babbling, so that's like this thing that's celebrated. And like with music, it's kind of the opposite. Well, you kind of know a song. Go hang out with. You can't really hang out with the people that really shred. So to be in an environment where like it's so celebrated and everyone's doing it together, that's a really profound experience to start off from. Like,
Yeah, I'm really grateful for it. I don't take it for granted. I know it's not necessarily the norm,
right? What's so cool though?
but it did foster an appreciation for music and the arts in our family. We were like a movie family where my
Yeah.
parents would back in the days of VHS tapes, they would record movies from Showtime and HBO and things. So we would have like a library of VHS tapes with all these movies on them. And so I I think we were. It was definitely an environment where an appreciation for the arts was encouraged and it was considered normal.
Film being like, man, records are hard to make, but films are like next level. Was there like any particular like directors that were celebrated in the household?
Um, I didn't become aware of directors until later. Probably the first time I really became aware of the work of a particular director and started to really focus in on it was David Lynch.
Okay. Yeah, that guy's deep.
Because like when I was a kid, I saw the movie The Elephant Man,
Right?
and the movie had a profound effect on me, but I didn't say to myself, who directed this? Um, I just sort of absorbed it as a piece of work. But then later, um, when Twin Peaks happened, uh, that's kind of when I was like, oh, that's the guy that directed The Elephant Man.
Yeah, made the connect. Okay.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, I think he also did Blue Velvet. And so I started to kind of connect the dots.
Mm.
And I
Okay.
also then, as a kid, I had seen the movie The Shining. My parents let me watch that really, in retrospect, earlier than they should have,
Yeah.
because I literally had nightmares about being chased by Jack Nicholson for many years after that. But then as I got a little older, like into my teens, I started to discover um, other works by Stanley Kubrick, and connected that to, oh, this is the guy that directed The Shining, which is a movie that I loved
That terrified me.
as a kid. That scarred me for life. When I was, because that movie came out in what, like 1980 or 81.
I think so, yeah.
Because I was born in 72, so I was 8 when it came out, and then I would have been 9 when it was on Showtime. And so that's when I saw it, and we taped it, and I watched it like repeatedly. Um,
Not just once, enough to really
not
get it
just
in.
once. Oh no,
That's
oh no.
awesome.
But then later, some years later, I saw like Clockwork Orange, like when I was 16,
Yeah, that's a whole
and
nother.
then I was like, oh, this is the guy that directed The Shining, and you can tell. That's what, like, in my late teens is when I started to see that there was like a recognizable kind of thumbprint that directors would put on their movies, and like you you could watch a little bit of a movie and tell who directed it if you were really paying attention.
Yeah, that's a big revelation, especially it pans out in all art to see like that's the thing that is that guy or that girl, and like that resonates with me. I should follow. Or why is that? It's kind of like the self analysis of why is this? Oh, because I saw that then, and it's a really profound thing, especially when you're younger, to kind of pick up that you can leave a thumbprint like that, or you can even see a track of someone like that. When did you see the Pope of Greenwich Village? I can't talk today.
Yeah.
When did that film come in?
Um,
Because that had a profound effect musically on you guys, at least name wise.
it did. It did. And I hate to be this guy, but it's actually pronounced Greenwich.
Thank you. No, it's fine. Like,
Greenwich Greenwich Village. That movie was a late 70s movie. I'm pretty sure it came out in the late 70s. I might not have seen it until a few years later. So, yeah, right around probably 10, 11, 12 years old is when we were watching that film. And, Mickey Rourke was one of the guys who we had a particular admiration for as an actor. There was just something about him. He brought together a few different elements that particularly appealed to me because he was cool, and there was an aspect of his personality where he was like kind of tough and in like an iconoclastic way, but he also has a lot of sensitivity and emotional depth as an actor. I mean, there's like real craft to what he was like. Particularly, I mean, he's just a great actor, but he's had such a bizarre trajectory to his career, and he's done a lot of like weird sort of like B movie action horror stuff. But during that period during the late 70s and into the 80s, then he would have been an actor that was considered an A-lister, like up there with like a dramatic actor who could get in the ring with a Robert De Niro and hold his own like an Angel Heart. So he sort of had it all. There was something really that really resonated with me and my brothers about Mickey Rourke as an actor.
It's interesting. The description of him having this kind of rough angle, but this deep emotional angle that seems pretty serendipical to the Popes musically, like, and maybe career wise, with being all over the place in a good way. Do you see any weird like commonalities with that, where that name kind of came
Oh,
from?
I guess now that you mention it,
I could be
like
projecting that, but
the music, the musical aspect of the Popes is kind of edgy and aggressive, but then the vocal and songwriting aspects of it are uh, more sensitive and
deep.
emotional. So
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't have made that connection before, but yeah, I think you're right.
That's cool. That's crazy how like I don't know, analyzing where things come from in a way leads to. But anyway, so the kind of like shift gears to get kind of caught up. Like, so when Speed Stick was hardcore like a thing that influenced you guys at that time, even to do it as kind of a joke? Were you like digging bands like Fugazi and Minor Threat and like Black Flag? I'm trying to think early '80s, Dead Kennedys and stuff. Was that like
Oh,
influential, or was it kind of like? a dig on it, then it was fun to do it.
Oh, yeah, we definitely loved, genuinely loved punk rock. And so our idea of being a parody of a punk rock band was not in any way to try to insult punk rock. It was more,
To embrace
I
it.
think, I think in the spirit of Spinal Tap. I think even those guys would say that they love rock and roll.
Definitely.
And that, you know, they were poking fun at aspects of it, but they had a basic reverence for hard rock. Um, a huge influence for us early on was the Dead Kennedys because of the really inspired creativity of what they were doing musically. There was there's a lot going on in their music, but also the the biting sarcasm of Jello Biafra as a vocalist and lyricist. Uh, like he, he almost, you know, his songs will be parodies, not of punk music, but like he will approach a song like it's a satirical work.
Definitely. Definitely. It's that's a really good analogy because I don't know with the Dead Kennedys they come off in this or even with the Ramones like a lot of their songs are kind of they're funny and but in a way that there's so much going on it's hard to like see it for what it is, but that kind of goes back to like that comedic delivery of the truth in a way like sometimes being able to kind of like makes it resonate more and
Yeah,
Jello's lyrics
totally.
definitely hit that hard. And like I think even his like his college career, he went for like advertising and just like everything with him seemed so like sarcasm and I don't know, it's awesome. But that's and musically too, they're kind of like if you're coming off from doing like covers like Maiden covers, that's an interesting like the Dead Kennedys have some Maiden-esque guitar parts. Maybe not harmonized, but definitely crunchy and like complicated.
Right. Um, yeah, that. I mean, I like Iron Maiden, but uh, that's not my that's not really my wheelhouse
Gotcha.
to have been in a like a Maiden cover band. I mean, it was fun to do, and my friends, the guys I was friends with back then, were really into it, and it was just sort of my first experience of playing in a band in
Right.
front of people.
So now, when the Popes, after this kind of like come to like we're gonna do this seriously, what were you guys still hitting the house venues and the DIY spots, or at this point were you able to get into some like venues?
Um, the first venue that the Popes started to play at with any regularity was a place called McGregor's in Elmhurst.
Okay.
It was an all ages place that would have punk shows. They're not in business anymore, but a lot of bands of our era that came up in the late '80s, early '90s. I mean, I guess the Pope started when '91. Yeah, so through the early to mid '90s, this was a venue that you know, bands that couldn't quite get a gig at a place like the Metro. You know, the McGregor's was more accessible, and plus their shows were all ages. You know, so and sort of cheap. So this was like the punk hangout in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, and it's like one of the first shows that I saw there. Might have been the first show I saw at McGregor's was Apocalypse Hoboken.
Okay. And you ended up recording
And
with them or playing with them?
yeah, I ended up joining that band. I was in that band for like not quite a year. I think of 9 or 10 months. I was in that band, and did an EP with them called Punish the Innocent that they recorded at Solid Sound, which is how I met Phil Bonet.
Okay.
And then the Popes did some records there.
Right, a big chunk of records, right?
Yeah, we did all our early 7 inches there. Anything after Inoculator was recorded there, and then we did Born to Quit was recorded there, and The Party's Over was recorded there.
I guess Solid Sound just shut down.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Gotcha.
Went out of business.
But
yeah, and this was pre-COVID and everything that they shut down. It was just their business had declined. I went there and visited just a few weeks before they closed and talked to the owner.
Yeah.
And he said that the truth was that they never recovered from Phil Bonet's death. Because Phil Bonet was their primary engineer who did most of the sessions that took place there. And after Phil died, a lot of their clients just didn't come back because it was a great studio, but they were there to work with Phil.
Right. Yeah, so much of a studio is the artist. If it's recording or if it's painting or whatever, the room just like illuminates the person within it. Damn. Yeah, that's rough. That's rough to kind of continue on when someone was that big of a part of it. And especially, I don't know, it also, technology had to throw in a wrench too, because like now people can make an album on their phone without setting boomboxes next to each other and keep the drums to sound the same. Got a little more leg up at the home demos.
Yep.
So
and also after the music industry changed in various ways that made it more and more difficult for people to have like a budget to record. But I don't know, that's another can of worms.
Yeah. Well, is it because it takes time? Recording takes time, and it takes multiple people's time. And like, if you want it to get done right, or you invest that time somewhere else in learning how to do a kind of okay recording, but it takes time on multiple. Even music is the capturing of time to some degree, like, or all degree. I don't know, but like, oh man. But to kind of shift gears from my spacey thought. So you guys are playing, and eventually you get an opening spot for Green Day. What was that like? And can you recall where that spot was?
I think it was at the Riviera.
Okay.
And I remember that we found out that we had that gig by reading about it in the Illinois Entertainer.
Okay. I guess we'll show up.
we look in there and we see an ad for the Riv, and it says, Green Day, special guest Smoking Popes. And that's the first we heard about it. And so we knew that, and Green Day, this was what, 93 or 4. This was right when Dookie had come out, and Green Day was huge. Yeah. 94. So Green Day was huge, and so that show, sold out show at the Riv. So we see our name on the ad for it, and so we contacted the guy the promoter of the show, and we were like, is this a misprint? Like, why are we listed as the opening band? And he said, oh yeah, Green Day, they asked for you guys specifically. They requested you to open for them, and
what? That's sick.
I figured there's no way you'd say no to it, so I just went ahead and put you down.
That's all. You were right. We were going to say yes to that for sure.
Yes, we were going to agree to that, but it's funny that you went ahead and committed to that in print,
right,
without even talking to us.
That is a little sketchy. Like assuming like
That
we were
promoter,
free.
yeah, that promoter was pretty sketchy, and I don't think he's still working anymore. But anyway, that was an amazing gig, and our association with Green Day kind of launched us into the world of the major labels, because
Right.
pretty soon after that, Green Day's managers decided to start a record label, and they asked us. We were the first band that they contacted to be on that label, and we ultimately didn't sign with them. But the fact that they had contacted us was the first domino that got tipped as far as like
Yeah.
major labels becoming aware of us.
Right. So
And so it started what what became a bidding war for us to sign.
that had to be a whole nother view of the music industry from that point. Now you're working with people giving big numbers and contracts and stuff.
Yeah,
Was it
yeah, it was nuts.
That's insane. That's insane for a gig that you didn't try to get but you got. that's that's incredible. And like what was it like hanging out with I mean, I imagine the band, the guys in the Green Day band, like I imagine they were super cool and supportive.
They were really cool, and then we ended up encountering them a couple other times. One time we were touring in California, and uh, Billy Joe had us over to his house. This was like right when we had signed, or in the process. Oh no, this was like right when in the middle of the bidding war. So it was probably like the year, within a year after that show. We were out in California. We were on tour, but we were also like meeting with all these labels.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that, Billy Joe invited us to come over to his house, and we spent about an hour over there. And we saw he had a home studio in his basement, and he played us a demo of a song that he had just finished recording, and it wound up subsequently on a Green Day record. But we heard this early demo of it in his basement. It's pretty cool.
Whoa, that's so
He's
sick.
a really cool guy. Like, he just was very friendly and approachable and nice. And then another time, Trey came to one of our shows and was hanging out, and also very nice, friendly dudes who just seemed pretty down to earth despite their massive fame.
Right. And like with a group like that that's still, that's still like moving and still continuing their career, what like lessons did you learn from those experiences, or maybe just observing them like as like the senior class band?
Yeah, well, I think one of the secrets of Green Day's success has been their willingness to evolve creatively while still seeming to have an understanding of what it is that people like about them. So they
Mm,
maintain some core element of their identity, but they also aren't afraid to try different things and to kind of not get stuck in
right.
a rut.
Seems like a fine line that's not easy to balance. But
Yes,
wow.
yes, it can be.
Um and so after that, you guys started like touring with like, and once all that got figured out and hitting the road with some like fairly big names at the time, like the Violent Femmes and the Foo Fighters.
Yeah, we played a handful of times with the Violent Femmes, and we met. This is something that's interesting to me. Is like when you meet a band, just the different the different personalities of the band members. There'll be like one member of the band who's like really outgoing, and so you end up having a conversation with that person. But then
Yeah.
somebody else in the band is like an introvert, So you never talk to him. And that was basically the case with the Violent Femmes. We had a bunch of conversations with the bass player, but never spoke to Gordon Gano. I would see him hanging around, but he just kept to himself and would just sort of be, you'd see him like occasionally walking in and out of like their dressing room, but he never would come over, and he just kind of kept to himself. And it's not, in a situation like that, you don't go up to him and be like, "Hey, man, thanks for having us on the show. Good to meet you. You guys are great." You wait. You sort of let him take the lead, and that was also the case with, like, we played a few times with Cheap Trick.
Wow.
And
right.
Like, the bass player. Maybe it's a thing with bass players. Bass players really just tend to be outgoing, but their bass player would come over and talk to us and just hang out, and we'd have long conversations with him. But Robin Zander would keep to himself, and I only had one brief conversation with Robin Zander, and that's only because I was introduced to him by our manager who owned the Metro, and so he had a relationship with the band, and sort of like, I wouldn't have just walked up to Robin Zander and started talking to him, but he was just more elusive and enigmatic. Probably the most surprisingly outgoing and down-to-earth famous person I met in that regard was Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters.
Yeah, he seems like an outgoing.
By the time we played with them, like, the man was already an icon. He was like a rock icon. But we played with them. I think this might have also been at the Riv, because I remember being downstairs before the show. We're sitting in our dressing room, just sort of, twiddling our thumbs, and then Dave Grohl walks in and says, "Hey guys, I'm Dave. Great to meet you. Thanks for playing." He goes around, shakes our hands, starts talking to us in sort of a gregarious fashion, and immediately, sort of put us at ease about him. Like, he was just incredibly approachable. Yeah, so that was fun.
But it's fascinating, the dynamic between groups, and like that's an interesting comparison with a lot of bass players that are kind of outgoing, and like it makes sense that maybe the singer songwriter is a little more introverted and like focused on like a bunch of different things happening. Now with the Popes, eventually you guys tour with Morrissey, and like he was a fan of your guys. Like what lessons did Morrissey bestow upon?
Oh, what lessons? I don't know. I mean, it was pretty amazing to just watch him perform every night. There was an approach to stage performance that he had that we got to study night after night, and I had a couple of very interesting conversations with him. He's an extremely intriguing and interesting person to talk to. He says kind of unusual things.
Yeah. Like what?
Well, like when we were on tour with them, he's another person who you didn't approach him. You kind of waited for him to make the approach. So he would come up to us sometimes while we were doing our sound checks. He did this a few times on tour, where he would come onto the stage and come over to me and say hello, and then he would ask me a question specifically about the lyrics to some of our songs. Like we have a song called "Let's Hear It for Love," and there's one of the lyrics in there is, let's hear it for bucket seats. Let's try it like this. But he came up to me at a sound check and said hello, and he said, I'm just curious, what's a bucket seat? And I said, well, it's in a car. If it's usually in the front seat. If the seat isn't connected, it's not one long seat. It's like two separate seats. It's a bucket seat. And he goes, oh, bucket seat. I thought you were saying bucket seed, SEED. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, it's seat. I've never heard of a bucket seed. And he's like, neither have I. That's why I was confused.
That's awesome.
And then that's like the end of the conversation. And so I don't know. I just took it that not only that he had a question, but also there was sort of a gesture on his part to come over and to let me know that he listened to our music, paid attention to the lyrics, and wanted to know about the what they meant.
Right.
Like it was sort of a gesture, like between artists.
Yeah.
Obviously, the greater artist sort of bestowing some generosity on the lesser artist by saying, I consider your work to be valid enough to listen to and pay attention to and think about. So I think that's sort of where he was coming from, which was like just sort of a interesting approach to conversation. Like I never knew what it was going to be when he came over and talked to me.
That's so cool. That's so cool they contemplate in it. And like, I guess like if you're gonna talk to Morrissey or maybe even anyone in general, if you go on and approach them with like an actual question, I think a lot of conversations, and I'm sure you've experienced much more in your line of work, is just kind of like, hey, how's it going? The weather, what I mean? There's a lot of small talk, and not too many people kind of dive deep right away. So to have someone that doesn't kind of mess around with it and just waits to be like, here's a deep question, like that's so rad.
Yeah.
And it's
But I also I took Morrissey to be a person who communicates through his work
right.
more so than the average person. Like his, I don't know, he's sort of a very enigmatic person, but my understanding is that he doesn't have a lot of close relationships in his life. And I've known, like, it reminds me of something that I read in an interview with Tom Waits, where he was talking about Ricky Lee Jones, because he used to be romantically involved with Ricky Lee Jones back in the 70s and 80s. But he described her as being a person who like needed her work in order to express herself more than the average person did, because there are ways that she seemed unable to express herself in personal relationships, that she relied on her art to be that sort of connecting point between her and the outside world. And I thought that was interesting of him to say that about her, but I recognized that potentially in Morrissey. I think he kind of sees, if you're an artist, he sort of sees it that way, that the art that you're putting out there, like that is your connection point to the rest of the world.
Right.
And so for him to be speaking about lyrics, that is like the basis of like what a relationship or a friendship could be, I suppose.
Right. Well, he's talking shop. He's talking the one thing he definitely knows how to do, and sharing that with you. Like, that's super deep. Like, I don't even know how to like to fathom that. Like, that's insane. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Kind of like to shift gears for a second, one thing I didn't really, what I've been wondering about, like,
Okay.
with
And just to let you know, I've got about maybe 10 more minutes, and then I have another thing I got to do. So
okay, I'll boil it down to like 3 questions. With singing style, this idea that there's like this crooning and this punk, was that like that couldn't have been like an intended thing, but you grew up around with like country artists and Frank Sinatra and all these different influences. Was this just what was comfortable, or was this just like kind of a weird amalgamation of different styles and just what happened? Like, as far as your approach to singing with the Popes.
well, if you listen to our stuff from our earlier 7 inches, I had a different vocal style where I wasn't doing much vibrato. I was doing more of kind of a shouting thing. I mean, there would be, I still was writing melodies, but my delivery wasn't very croony. The crooning thing is something that I started to incorporate on our first full-length album because of the song "Let's Hear It for Love."
Gotcha.
It seemed to me that when we were recording that song, that it would be fitting because of the vibe of the song. It would be fitting to try to deliver that like a crooner, especially when it got to that line in the chorus that said, "Let's hear it for love." Like it just, that seemed very loungy,
Right.
and like kind of Dean Martin-y. And so in the studio recording that song was the first time I really went for it with the vibrato. And I remember like trying a take of that song and like cracking up because it seemed funny to be doing it that way. But we kept it, and it ended up sort of permeating my vocal style in general.
Wow.
I don't know. I'm sort of convinced that a lot of things that certain artists do were supposed to be funny when they first happened, but then they got sort of, taken seriously somewhere along the way.
Got called out for it, and like, what you're doing is important. You're like, huh? Like, that's
Well,
awesome.
Like I'm thinking of like, say, the Talking Heads.
Right.
Like the first time he decided to put on a giant suit that was like
right.
five sizes too big for him, with like coat hangers in it that was going to make it like shake.
Right.
Like that suit looks completely ridiculous. And I don't know this, but in my mind,
right.
I picture him the first time he put that suit on. He just cracks up, and everybody in the band who sees it, like they're just like, they're like, that is the most absurd thing we've ever seen, David.
There's definitely that comfort of making stuff joyous. I guess when it comes down to like performance, that's what you're trying to do is bring joy or spark some sort of like grand avail of some self-knowledge, and I imagine that comes better through joy than some other emotions. And it's interesting that the kind of comedic cushion has led to all these really deep insights, and especially musically with your career. Another question I had to kind of shift gears, because I know we're running out of time, is the book Mere Christianity. What role, how important is that, and what can you tell me about how much that book resonated with you?
Oh, that book completely changed my life. I had this will be a real condensed version of the story, but like I was at a point in my life where I was I was looking for truth. I was looking for God, and I had a feeling that Jesus was somehow the key. Like he knew what was going on. Like as I was kind of studying the religious figures that exist in the world, reading about Buddhism and different schools of thought, Eastern philosophy and things, and then Jesus. I felt like Jesus somehow had the key to really knowing God, but I didn't know. I wasn't a Christian. I wasn't attracted to Christianity. I didn't feel like Christianity resonated with me. I had a lot of questions about how I was supposed to interpret the things that Jesus was saying. And in a nutshell, reading that book answered a lot of the basic questions I had about who is Jesus and what am I supposed to do with him and his teachings. How am I supposed to apply that to my life? And what does it actually mean to be a Christian? Because it turns out that a lot of my sort of resistance to Christianity as a religion was based on certain stereotypes that I had and misunderstandings that I had. But he boiled it down in a way that presented to me the core of what it meant to be a Christian in a way that illuminated my mind in a way that permanently transformed my life.
It's beautiful. With Christianity. There's so many different like subsects of it, and it's hard even reading passages from the Bible. They're dense. They're hard to understand, and like to boil things down and like find something that makes it clear is amazing. And that's when, after all, like that kind of like Duvall. Am I saying that right? That project kind of spun out somewhere in the midst of
Oh yeah.
Because like that.
Yeah, like Duvall is the right way to say it. It's basically the band is named after Robert Duvall.
Got it.
Another
interesting.
Yeah, so that was I had quit the Smoking Popes because of my newfound Christian faith, and Duvall was sort of what turned out to be an intermediate project for me. I wanted to get back into playing rock music, but I wasn't ready to re-embrace the Popes. So the Duvall was like a Christian version of the Smoking Popes.
Yeah, and those records
stylistically, I think it sounds fairly similar to the Smoking Popes, but lyrically, there are sort of themes of faith and some theological ideas that are being worked out in the lyrics of that song.
Yeah, those records are
those
great.
Songs.
So I guess my last question, because I know we're running out of time, is this new live album you're putting out. It's a charity, right? For Hideout, the venue.
It's not a charity album, but it was recorded at the Hideout, and it's sort of the idea of it is that it would be, recording a live album at an independent venue in Chicago would be helpful to that venue and sort of bring attention to independent venues in Chicago. I mean, we have information on the back of the record about the Chicago Independent Venue League and their website information. So it is, sort of encouraging people to check out those organizations that are helping, local venues. And so it's definitely like community minded. It's a project that is supposed to be connective in the local music community, and it was so amazingly fun to do. But it's like from the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about performing in empty rooms,
Right.
and it definitely was.
That to some degree.
It was that, and it was unusual in that regard, because it was a live performance that was being, filmed and live streamed. So we were being watched, but there was only a few people in the room. There was a camera person and a couple of sound engineers. So we, on the stage, you just sort of have to generate your own energy. But also, I wasn't primarily concerned with giving a physical performance as much as I was playing the right notes, because I knew that we were capturing this for an album.
Right.
And I didn't want to have to do any overdubs or studio fixes of the stuff. So I was kind of restrained in my performance, because I was just focusing on playing the right notes, and I'm glad I did, because now I hear the record, and it's a little loose in spots, so it has that feel of a live performance, but it's pretty accurate. There's no real discernible flubbed notes on it, so I'm happy about it.
I think that's kind of the key with all music is let's get as long as the audience can't hear the flub, it's good. And you had a new personnel for this project, right? So were they
Yes.
kind of just learning the tunes as well?
It's a couple of guys that I've known for many years, but we've never played in a band together. John Perrin, who plays drums in NRBQ.
Yeah.
And then John San Juan, who is the singer, guitar player for a band called the Hush Drops, but he's also a multi-instrumentalist. I knew that he played bass, and I asked him to play bass on this. And those guys are this incredible rhythm section who are so creative and bring so much inspiration to it. And what we did is we got together and started working on a collection of cover songs, but they're old cover songs.
Right.
Like we do a cover of My Funny Valentine, and we do a version of I Only Have Eyes for You. And so these songs are all like 50, 60, 70 years old.
Some real book tunes.
Yeah, they're like, they're from the Sinatra era.
Right.
And that's something that the Popes had explored on an album that we did called The Party's Over, where we did a bunch of old standards and we kind of did them in our own style. And I wanted to continue to explore that idea, but this time with different musicians.
Yeah, you guys.
And so there's 10 songs. Yeah, there's 10 songs in the album. 6 of them are covers of other people. 4 of them are covers of my own songs, where we would take songs that I wrote for the Smoking Popes, but rearrange them and sort of like break them down and build them up again in a completely different way, with like different rhythms, different tempos, different time signatures. And so treating those as if they were covers as well.
So it's interesting that what was the thought process of covering yourself and trying to rearrange? Was that complicated or was it more comforting?
It was just fun. Like everything about this project was just pure fun. Because when you're writing a song, there's a variety of ways that you could approach it.
Right.
Just because the Smoking Popes recorded it at a certain tempo or with a certain arrangement doesn't mean that's the only way you could do it. There there were infinite ways that we could have chosen to do that song in the first place.
Right.
And so, but you commit to one for your album, and then you're sort of locked into that for the rest of your career. And this was just a chance for me to liberate some of those songs from their original arrangement. And in the process, I wanted to put those songs side by side with some of these old songs that I was inspired by as a songwriter. For example, there's a song that we cover on this album called "What Kind of Fool Am I?", which I've always thought that "Need You Around" is sort of an homage to the song "What Kind of Fool Am I?". If you put those songs next to each other, there's a similarity in the cadence of the melody and the phrasing of it. So I wanted to put both those songs are back to back on the album, and you can kind of see the connection between them.
That's cool. That's cool. Like,
so that was one of the ideas of this record, is to do that.
it's interesting because like a lot of like old like country tunes will take they'll do certain artists will do a play on almost the same melody but change the lyrics and the same chord progression and like make it a whole different
Yep.
song. Or even like Dylan's current career, like he just takes what you expect him to do and completely rearranges it, and you don't even know what it is. And you're like, oh, it's Tangled in Blue now because he said it at this one point.
Yep. Totally.
Well, that's awesome. I heard the one track on Bandcamp that you can listen to, and it sounds really cool. And it's a really,
thank you.
It's a really cool like way to pay like homage to all these artists that you've dug their songs and mix them with yours and with your group and the current personnel, and to make it a communal thing. So that's really awesome.
Cool. I'm glad you like it, man. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for hanging out and talking. I really appreciate your time. Does your guitar?
Oh, sure, man. Thanks.
Still use cigarettes to get rid of the buzz?
No, but
No? No.
But I still have that guitar with the piece of a cigarette pack that Phil Bonet put it on it. It's still there.
Beautiful.
All right. Every time I change the strings on that guitar, I'm careful to make sure that piece of cardboard does not fall out.
That has to be pretty tattered by now, but I'm glad it still works.
Yeah, well, it's been there for like 20 years.